All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to R2integrated's Women in Tech, a She-Suite Leadership Panel. We're very excited to have everyone to join us today. And before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Following the panel, there will be opportunity for live Q&A with our female leaders. During the panel, please ensure your mic is muted so we can hear each panelist's answers clearly. And to kick us off, I'd like to introduce our moderator today. Our very own Executive Director of Client Services, Renee Timchuk, will be leading our discussion amongst our leaders, a strategic customer success professional with a proven record of accomplishment in client service management, account development, channel marketing, and client relations. Renee also has a strong history of building deep client relationships with top strategic accounts and building solid rapport with internal staff and client bases to deliver the highest quality service and impactful strategic plans to our clients. Thanks for your time today, Renee.
Thank you for the introduction, Brittany, and welcome everyone to R2i's Women in Tech She-Suite Leadership Panel event. I'm excited to be here and thrilled to have all of you join us during your busy work schedules and honored to be part of this great and relevant topic. I know I speak for a number of women on the call today in saying that we're excited to receive all the knowledge you have to share. But before we dig in, I would like to take a moment to first thank each of you for the devotion and in taking the time to contribute to our discussion. Welcome, please, Bailey, Nancy, and Daniela. I'll have each of you do a short intro to speak to your expertise and background. Bailey, let's get started with you.
Yes, thank you. I think I'm unmuted. Yep. Thank you so much to R2I for asking me to join in. I'm super excited to be here. I'll keep my story short and sweet. I have always been in the financial industry. I started at City and County just as their marketing assistant, really getting all areas of marketing and played in the community space, business development, branding, and then I really fell in love with strategy. So my full-time job is spent at City and County driving all the marketing strategy. In my after-work life, you can find me camping. I love to dance. I mean, I'm really just a good beer-drinking Wisconsin girl. But my credit union is in Minnesota, so I live right on the border.
Great. Thank you, Bailey. Yeah, great. Nancy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invite. My career is pretty interesting. It's kind of gone the gamut. I started very much on the agency side in New York and did 12 years working on General Motors and Coca-Cola and integrated platforms between linear and digital. So I have seen the agency side of the house stem to stern, and then moved to LA and worked on the publisher side and moved into account services, client services, ultimately standing up a team for Fox and Fox Sports to do all of their digital client services and ad operations. Then most recently, just recently, moved into higher ed. And so now I have applied all of those fun learnings to marketing over at Johns Hopkins Carey Business School.
Great, thank you. Daniela.
Hey everyone. First, thanks Renee and the R2I team. I'm super thrilled to be here today on this panel with these extraordinary women. I consider myself a digital marketing innovator. I have been in B2B high-tech industry for 20 years, marketing software to hardware. I've been a pioneer in the digital marketing space here at Ciena for 16 years. I've started up several areas with email marketing, database marketing. I brought our virtual webinar events to the company. Marketing automation, and most currently my paid media role, where I head up paid media here. Of course, all of this crosses over with SEO and the website and the core of analytics. I have, a family here in Boston that I live with. I'm in the Boston area. I raised 3 children. I like to get outdoors and be on the beach in the summer. So hopefully those weekends are coming soon.
Good. Thank you guys. And thank you again for all your time. I am blessed that I get to work with these women. These are my clients and partners, and it's such an honor. So thank you guys. stating that working with women, both my coworkers and my clients, really act as role models for one another, embrace their strengths and inspire one another to grow. They encourage me every day with their intelligence, compassion, ability to manage multifaceted lives, as you've heard from people with their children and their outdoor activities and doing other types of things. Certainly are inspiring and passionate about what they do, and that comes through in everything we work together on. According to the National Center for Women in Information Technology, in the United States alone, women make up about half of the workforce, but fill only 25% of professional computing or tech jobs. Women in tech have historically been underrepresented and undervalued, but a clear opportunity for radical change is in view. This starts with understanding where we are now, how we got here, and where we want to go next. Let's start with the topic of career challenges. Women in tech, much like their sisters in other industries, face a number of on-the-job challenges. In tech, the challenges women encounter often look different than those faced by their male counterparts. In a recent global report, women ranked a lack of equity as a leading challenge. Nancy, what challenges, if any, have you faced pursuing a tech-related career?
It's interesting because I find that when you kind of look back a little bit on your career, you can see certain very specific moments in time where there's been a pivot, right? And so one of those challenges that you're kind of referencing is being able to articulate how skills you have developed in other areas, right, is applicable to tech. And so early in my career, I had an example where I was brought in to do sales development for Fox. But the reality is that all of our back rooms from the digital side were managed by Microsoft. And we wanted to make a case, or I made a case to deprecate that relationship and take those resources in-house. And so having to make the case from a business perspective, define what the revenue plus would be, right? And then outline what the operational side would be was an enormous undertaking, especially because in theory, my title was Director of Sales Development, right? It had nothing to do technically with how things were managed on the back end and ads were served. But the reality was we were hamstrung by the rules of Microsoft, and Fox wanted to be more nimble. And so in order to do that, we had to take it in-house. And so I made the business case and then had to essentially figure out how to onboard an ad server. And my prior 10 years had been all about media buying. So you are having to explain that it's the project management skills, it's the knowing how to ask the right questions, it's knowing how to get in the details with Google and really dig into the business and tech side as one was a very big lift, but proved successful because when they turned off Microsoft, Fox went on, and believe it or not, it worked, which was amazing in and of itself. I was like, if 60% of it works on day one, I'll be thrilled. And I think we ended up at like 85% efficiency over the course of the site. So it was a win, but it was not a small undertaking to get that business case outlined and convince people that I promise you at the end of the day, this is going to be a net benefit, and you have to understand that just because I am not a product manager, right, by trade, does not mean I do not understand how these systems integrate, and I don't know how to ask the questions to get the answers I need from Google, right, at the time. So I think it is challenging, but it certainly can be done, and you have to be prepared, right? Like, I mean, I went in with a very strong rationale on the upside of what the financials would be first and foremost, and then how I would essentially stand up a team. I was fortunate enough that that particular experience allowed me to do a bigger exercise when Disney bought Fox a number of years later. So that was my first major project at Fox. And then lo and behold, Disney purchased the entire corporation and they spun off New Fox. And I was tasked with building a digital client services team, including ad ops and live ad operations, which is different for sports. So different systems, bifurcation of systems, and establishing which, what, where you need, where you're turning it on, what goes off, what I need to steal for another 6 months. All of that is possible, but it really came down to the business case that you make, and leading with the financials is what sold the experience.
Yeah, great success story. I mean, Awesome job. So, and you were working in tech, you were working in sports, you were working in a whole different area and pulling together a case and making it very relevant, even coming from a female leader and taking that stance.
It's interesting that you say the sports piece, because I will say this to anyone if you're on the phone, being a direct, I have a direct style, right, when it comes to managing a lot of things in my particular business. The reality is the sports element is definitely male dominated, as you can imagine, especially the back end of the house and the operational side of the house. So knowing how best to communicate with the environment with which you are in, and knowing how to speak to your audience and tailoring that message in particular has been the thing that has been most helpful, right, in clearing a lot of those hurdles that we kind of generalize from a male-female communication style. So just being cognizant of how you communicate your messaging to any particular audience has been critical in any of these particular projects that I've worked in, especially in the tech and the sports tech space.
Yeah, definitely. Well, good. Thank you very much for sharing. Continuing on, let's go with our next question. In our report from Indeed surveying 2,000 tech workers, 67% of male respondents said they'd be comfortable with asking for a raise or a promotion in the next month, but only 50% of women said they'd be comfortable asking for that raise or promotion. So how have you built confidence and or resiliency over the course of your career? And I know each of you have great input into this. So Daniela, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. Personally speaking, I went through a journey with my last promotion. I did ask for the promotion. And I call it a journey because it was about 2 years from when I asked and started the conversation to when it became into effect. So, my first piece of advice and how I created that resiliency is really, you need to start that conversation. You need to ask. No one is going to just hand you a promotion on a silver platter because they see you're working so much. Asking really starts the conversation. And not only are you asking for what you are looking for in your next step in your career, you're finding out what the process is to get there. So what is the process? Who is the decision maker? What is the timeline? What are the conversations I need to start having to build your own case? As Nancy was saying, it's a business case, but it's a business case for yourself. We as marketers, we do a great job day to day building marketing strategies to grow our companies. We need to build marketing strategies for ourselves, for our own career development, because we own that. The second thing I will mention is start to document your current role, the responsibilities you currently have, and compare it to your original position description. That alone is powerful to see that growth on paper, or on a PowerPoint slide. And that's how it's confidence. It's, every time you're having that conversation with your manager or your manager's manager, whoever needs to make to make that promotion happen, it is building your confidence every time, showing how much you have grown and the level of responsibilities and the conversations you are now having in your role. And third, continually advocate for yourself over and over and over again. I did it for 2 years to get the promotion, and I'm still doing it today. And seek yourself out an advocate. Have an advocate along with you for the ride. It could be your manager, it could be your manager's manager, a peer. It helps.
Yeah, great. I love the, build your personal brand. As you said, you women are amazing at what you do and doing that for your companies, but yeah, your personal brand and great tips. I love those tips. I think everyone on this call has probably gotten a little bit of encouragement or confidence, hopefully now to use those. So I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely. Great. Bailey, would you like to jump in on this one?
Yes, I love this question because I think back to when you asked Bailey, like, can you share a little bio? And immediately, like, my heart panics of like, what did I do? Like, what am I responsible for? And who am I? And I think as women, it's really hard to vocalize what we're good at, or here's what we accomplished, and, you know, here's what sets me apart. And so my biggest advice is, like, never sit idle on where you are. Always have your resume ready. Don't let that thing sit like in a file, you know, that you haven't touched for 10 years or even a couple months. Always make sure that's updated. Have your portfolio website ready. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter what's even on there, but the fact that you've taken the step to build yourself a personal brand, like Daniela said, having that ready not only sets you up for, you know, external opportunities, but internal. And sometimes when you show up and want to have that bigger conversation, bringing those documents forward to say, hey, here is what I'm doing and here is what I'm successful at. It's a lot easier because then you're not fumbling with your words like I was through my bio, because again, it's hard as women to say, here's what walks my M, here's what I do, here's my title, blah, 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 blah. But when you have it and it's documented, it's easier than doing that. And I'll just give a quick little story, but in my current role, there were some leadership changes and I was up for this position. And I sat down and the person interviewing me, I've been with the company for 7 years at this time. The person at the company had no idea what I was previously doing, no idea what I was working on, no idea what I was responsible for. So as much as you think people are paying attention, you need to speak up for yourself and say, here's actually what I do, even though you think I just like show up on our social media pages every now and then. So yeah, just going that extra mile, be prepared, be ready to go, and just take it by storm. And the least people can say is no. So that's my little tidbit.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think I like your point of writing it down, having it already, because I'm not good at speaking about what I do well and what, you know, we're very good at, you know, promoting our children, promoting our employees, promoting everyone else. And, you know, having that ready and kind of rehearsed just so it comes off more naturally is a great idea. So thank you. I totally appreciate that. Nancy.
I think I agree with all of the above. And I certainly think that knowing your self-worth and your how your network, right, can really help you. And I think networking is an under discussed thing that everyone needs to maintain. It's one thing to have a bio, it's one thing to have a LinkedIn profile and a resume. But at the end of the day, it's your network that really is going to get you your next job. And it's not the people you talk to every day, it's the people that they know, right? And so you had, I think the top of the question was something along the lines of like, what builds that resiliency to allow you to ask and to advocate for yourself? And my personal journey is quite colorful, actually. I have been in the agency for quite some time, right? I indicated that before. Over the course of 20 years, I've been laid off 3 times. And all through major restructures, right? Like buyouts, lost accounts, like big movements, lots of people. So a lot of people flood the market. And I have not only bounced back, but I have frankly excelled and been able to up my game with each change, right? So with each adjustment has led me to bigger, better, broader. And most of that is brought on not just by my skills, certainly, because it's not just luck. It's when luck and opportunity mix, right? And you're prepared enough for it, and you leverage your network that I never let go cold. And I think that always having that conversation, always being, you know, and I'm not talking on a regular daily basis, but I keep in touch with a very large group of people I may talk to once a year. But it's enough that when you are debating a career move, like getting into education, totally different, needed a whole different set of people to potentially make that move. It was a different set than perhaps going from agency to agency or publisher and things of that nature, that a little bit more linear. But I would say knowing your self-worth, knowing that you can, any sort of setback is, or perceived setback really isn't, it is a growth opportunity. And knowing how to reposition yourself for the market you find yourself in. I was at the recession, right? 2008 was the Great Recession and layoff there. And then now we've had this lovely pandemic. That was certainly fun for a reinvention. I just think everybody should take stock, not just when you write that resume, but what are the intangibles that your resume doesn't say, right? Like that is one of my interview questions every time. It is always, I have your piece of paper. What is not on it? Tell me at least one thing that's not on it that's really interesting about your career, right? And it doesn't be a thing. It can be a skill or a soft skill that is just not something that comes through on a piece of paper. And so that's my 2 cents on the resiliency.
Yeah, great. Yeah, we are certainly more than a piece of paper. So I appreciate what's beyond that. That's really makes us who we are, and strong women and strong leaders. And networking's key. I think through the pandemic, some of us probably lost that touch and that talent. And here's time to start re-networking. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think we all can continue to do that more, and keep those people we've worked with in the past. And in my own personal story, there's someone that works for R2I who's very good at networking, and I had worked with in the past a few years ago. And originally that ultimately landed me this job due to some great networking and keeping in contact there. So definitely agree and appreciate that. So thank you, everyone, for answering that. Speaking of career courses and pass over time, as we've been doing, let's dive into dedication and ability to remain in your current roles throughout the pandemic. Virtually every person on earth was affected. Many continue to personally and professionally still be affected, especially women. As it's been coined, the pink pandemic, this shared experience has proved to be devastating loss to women. Just months before the pandemic hit, women held more jobs in the US than men, actually. So what can organizations do moving forward and looking ahead to encourage more women to forge onward in tech careers? Daniela, can I start with you just to hear your thoughts on that?
Sure. So here at Ciena, I've been working here 16 years and have spent the entire 16 years working remote. So the pandemic didn't really impact me too much in my work style, but others around me, for sure. Our company has moved into a work from anywhere type of mentality, like I think many companies have, just to stay attractive. It provides the flexibility. It supports employees' passions, men or women. So not specifically for women in tech careers, but as organizations move into this approach, it's opening up the, flexibility to pursue passions. And I think that's important. But I'm going to flip this a little bit and say, what can you do? Not just the organization, but as an individual, as a female, what can you do to forge onward in tech career, working remote? For me, that's sharpening your soft skills. We were just talking about soft skills and how important they are. It's exercising your emotional EQ. Read the room, even though it's a virtual room, read the room, think about when it's time for you to speak on a call rather than always interrupting. It's not always about making yourself being heard, but speak up when you have something of value to say. So anyways, I think it comes down to soft skills. Of course, organizations need to move in that direction as well, but it's a combination of the two.
Yeah, good. And I like the speak up part. I know, sometimes if you're in a male-dominated call and you're the only woman in that call, and it's in a tech environment where that might not sit as well, speak up. Everything you have to say is just as important. So definitely appreciate that too. Nancy, I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
I love the EQ, and I say that because it's so critical, and it's been imperative, especially as I've been interviewing people through the pandemic, how people interact with me in an interview through screen, through video. Who had ever done that before? I had never worked remotely until the pandemic. And then suddenly it was manage a team of 40, not just across the country, but you are never going to be in anybody's space for a year plus, right? But to interview that way and to be able to recognize EQ when you are having that kind of one-on-one dialogue has been critical for me to find talent, right? And to your point, how do you foster women in the tech? The reality is I have found that ensuring ironically, now that I think about it, I've actually only happened to have hired women over the course of the pandemic. I've only had a couple of them positions, but they happen to have been women in this go around. But a big part of it was because I needed people who could respond and pick up the non-verbal cues, which is a very hard thing to do for some people. And I respect it and understand it, but it's something that is critical in this environment in particular, that you have that emotional intelligence and you can see it and respond, not as a direct question, but just in the manner in which you do respond, that is just been paramount to success, right? And that has led to actually what I would call elevation of the game for a variety of staff that I have had over the course of the last 2 years. Those who can adapt and understand that, like, there may be days where some people don't want to be on camera and you have to kind of work through that. It's kind of like going back to the old phone, right? It's like, no video. It's like, wait, I used to pick up the phone directly as opposed to the video chat. And you just have to listen more, right? But there's still an acknowledgement. And so people who can both just recognize what's going on verbally and visually, absolutely imperative. So that going forward, those soft skills will be more critical than ever. And I think that as women in tech and as women in general, we are fortunate enough to be typically a little bit more cognizant of those things and people's feelings and reactions to anything that's stated.
Yeah, great. All these are great points and great to hear, and certainly very relevant in our world today of Zoom, as we sit on Zoom today. So let's touch on women and continue to do so who are working in tech-related or driven industry. According to a report from Trust Radius, many women in tech, 78%, reported feeling they have to work harder than their male coworkers to prove their worth. Women in tech are also 4 times more likely than men to see gender bias as an obstacle to promotion. What do you think is the most significant barrier to female leadership? Daniela, I believe you wanted to speak to this one.
Sure. This is a good one, Renee. Yeah. I don't even know where to start. I think some of the barriers are the obvious ones. It's perception, it's history, it's a boys' club. Unfortunately, yes, there is still a boys' club that continues. You have to know how you want to play with that. You're not going to be part of the boys' club. So I take the approach of standing on my own, being unique, having my own voice. Again, building your own brand and separating yourself. But with all those things, all those barriers, and these huge barriers, change is happening. So just this morning, I don't know if everyone heard the announcement this morning, but the U.S. women's soccer team announced that they will now have equal pay compared to the men's U.S. soccer team. That's huge. And they've been fighting this for years. It should have always been the case, but they finally won that, and they've been fighting it for years. So change is happening finally. And I think, citing this example within your organization or within organizations is going to shift perception, and not just in the sports world, but in society as a whole. When I look at organizations that I want to partner with or build relationships with, I do my own homework. I think most of us do. We go on their website, we look at their brand, what do they stand for? I look at their executive board, leadership board, to see, the split, the breakdown of male versus females. I think the truth speaks in numbers. But, going back to breaking the barriers, it's my approach or my belief is that women need to exercise their power markers, whatever that power marker is. And that's what makes you perceived as a leader. It's your body language. It's your language. It's how you treat others in a room. It's being kind. treating others like you'd want to be treated and respectful. These are all actions that we want onto ourselves. And that defines your leadership style and sets you apart from others. And we were talking about this earlier too. Men have no problem talking about their experience. They don't shy away from it. They're full of confidence and they'll keep talking as long as there's an audience. Women shy away from it. We do. And we just need to build that confidence and start to vocalize who we are and what we stand for. And I also think women, well, should be happening if it's not happening today in your organization, but women should support women. One thing, a tip that I heard from another discussion is, and I do this today, create your own board of directors. I have a BOD. I have a board of directors. It's a group of women I work with. We align on values, we align on styles, we respect each other. We're smart women and we have our backs. We have each other's backs. If I'm walking into a meeting where I'm feeling a little, not as confident as I should, I reach out to them. In about 10 minutes, I'm floating on air, right? Those are the things that will help you get closer, I think, to breaking the barrier.
Yeah, I love that. A couple things there with the great news of the U.S. women's soccer team today. Talking about doing that now internally at your own company, I think, and building that confidence too. I think the three of you being on here and speaking to all that, I am sure is resonating to all the other women on this call to do just that. So, the change with the UM soccer, you guys are doing that. I can tell by what you're saying today at your own companies. And I think that today is resonating with women on this call to do the same. So I know that helps me, and you guys have become today's board of directors for me, and I'm sure some of the other women on the call. So thank you. I totally appreciate that. Well, good. We have time for another question. So when it comes to the representation of women in tech careers, the global picture is improving, and as Daniela even said, but there's still work that needs to be done. Deloitte predicts that at the largest tech companies, the proportion of the workforce that females will increase to 33% in 2022. It's a rise of about 2 percentage points from the year before. So that's encouraging, but it also shows the distance that's still there that needs to be made. So as a leader, how do you stay mindful who's at the table and who's missing? And what can be done if that issue does not come from managers? Instead, the issue isn't even recognized or the bias comes from your top executives at your company. Bailey, I would love to hear from you on this topic.
Yeah, I think just to even start, I think it's okay for us to realize that we can't change the world in one day. And sometimes I come in, I have this breakthrough moment. I'm like, I'm going to change everything. This is going to be great, and equality and DEI efforts. And then all of a sudden I'm like, all right, let's just have another cup of coffee and let's just actually make a plan. And so I just want to preface it by saying that sometimes we get very overwhelmed in this conversation, and it's really good conversation. But if you are really struggling, know that you're not alone. And so early on in my career, and this will stand out, but I was attending a meeting and I was leading the marketing efforts on a product line. And the other department lead was in there and we were working with a vendor. And I was asking a question and I got shushed during the call. It was just a played up, that's not important. And I felt like I was punched in the gut, and I went back to my desk and I was like, that just doesn't feel right. And it was in that moment that I made a promise to myself that I'm always going to stand up when I don't feel comfortable. So regardless who's at the table, whether it's your CEO or, your SVPs or, even a frontline staff member, and that's my world that I live in at a financial institution, that I was always going to address it. So even if in that moment you don't feel like you have the power to say something, take a day and the next day go in and say, hey, that wasn't okay and that made me feel really uncomfortable. And that's okay, because we're not all extroverted. We're not all in your face people, and that's totally fine. And so when you make that promise to yourself, really stay true to it, even if it's an uncomfortable, yucky conversation. And then at that point, you know, as an organization with that thought in mind, and I have to keep myself on ground zero, I can change what I have the power to change, right? So I'm going to make small steps for myself, my team. I'm going to advocate for women when I can. But if you're at an organization or on a team where you really feel stuck, it's okay to wave the white flag and go to a different opportunity. It's okay. And sometimes when you go to that next opportunity, you'll realize that the best payback that you can give is waving from that other competitor and say, hey, they understood my value. Your organization has a lot to work with, because I think as women, we want to take care of everybody and nurture and take as many as we can under our wing. But you also have to watch out for your own mental health. When it hits that point that it's affecting your job, you know, anxiety and depression, that all is a very serious conversation. So make sure that you're not getting stuck in this, I need to save the world in order to make an impact, because you need to save yourself first in order to do that and make an even bigger step forward. So that was kind of a long-winded answer, but I think it's just really important to recognize your own values. What is your personality trait? If you're not the one who's going to be in the loudest in the room, that's okay. Find a different way to get the voice heard to the person who matters, regardless who's in the room.
Yeah, I love that. You know, the old saying, you can't love anyone till you love yourself first. Take care of yourself first if you can take care of anyone else. It's
yes, agreed.
So
yeah,
so
we just don't talk about mental health enough. It's just as women, we carry a lot, right? Like this morning on my way to work, my husband calls and I need to call for an auto loan, and it's like a whole situation. I was like, is this normal? Like, does everybody have this when you walk in? And you got to take care of your house, your kids, your dog, you know, whatever you have. So it's just important to slow down and realize you are making an impact.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for bringing that to light, for sure. Good. I mean, this has been a great discussion today. Obviously very inspiring, very insightful. You all had something that, for me personally, I can take away from this and feel more empowered and more sure of myself, and also know it's okay when there are things that come up and we're still strong, and find that support group, that board of directors, all those things that are out there for you. It's all great. So I would love to take the opportunity now to open the floor to those that have joined us today for an open Q&A with our panelists. So please feel free to turn on your cameras and unmute at this time. I know Nancy, Bailey, and Daniela would love to hear from you. So if anyone has a question to get started, please feel free to jump in.
I will just say, I think it's very refreshing to hear you guys and what you're saying. It's just resonates so much to the everydays and the experiences. So I just want to say, I really do appreciate you guys and your perspectives. It's nice to hear it. So
You're welcome.
I will just note that Renee and Ciena, actually just seeing you pop up on the screen, R2I was with my journey as I grew into this leadership position, and we were in the current process of replatforming a website, and our IT department here, where my organization is at, is all male, intimidating. They can be seen as scary. I sat on my first call with them, and I felt like I got stomped on, like I was an ant. And in that moment, I had two options, right? Like I could either slink back and not do anything, or I could gather my troops and I could say, okay, here's what I'm trying to do. I know what I'm doing. I'm smart. I have everything, you know, in line, and R2I helped me do that. And so sometimes it's coming from help that maybe you don't even realize. And I am a big believer in PowerPoints. So if you have to put a PowerPoint together to prove a case on something you already know is a good choice, that's okay. It gives you backup, and reach out to those people who can back you up, because it's now a 180 of a conversation to say, this is what we're doing. Here is why, versus what do you think? You know, like, we don't need that validation. We're good at what we're doing, and let's, you know, make sure we're built up for that. So Ciena, I just saw you pop up, and I was like, oh gosh, the experience I've already had within the past few months of this whole process has been enlightening.
we learn from each other, I feel like, very much.
Yes.
So.
Yep, for sure.
Hey, Renee, yeah, hey, just thanks to all of you for joining. Really enjoyed the session and your candid comments and perspectives. Well, one thing I could be curious for you to think about is we're probably so. A lot of the conversation today was about your individual journeys and then harnessing the either explicit or behind the scenes support of other women. I think one of the traps that we all get in is when we coalesce around groups in any organization, and you know, my town versus your town, my state versus your state, my political party versus yours, women versus men, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to counter anything you said. I think it's very, very true. But sometimes we also assume that all men are this unified thing. Early in my career, I spent 10 years overseas in different countries, and so I was the outsider in those countries. And I ran a business in Australia, and we had 1,500 Australians there, and we had 10 Americans, and all the Australians thought like all the Americans were a club. And I said, I don't know any of these guys. We just all happened to show up in jobs in Australia, but it wasn't like we were the American team, And they said, oh, really? I mean, like, you guys don't go out to eat and do stuff? I said, no, I don't. I never met any of them before I even got here. We just happened to be here. So I think, what I'd like the question in that is, have you had times where, there are a lot of guys that are clubby, and there are certain industries that are more so, and I don't deny that, and there's jerky bosses, and many of them happen to be men, unfortunately, because of history and maybe privilege. But if you had the opportunity to find out advocates regardless of men versus women in businesses and use those as additional leverage as well, and several of you alluded to finding your networks and finding your sponsors. So I'd like you to maybe build on that, which the reflection is to not just get your feedback, but also to say, how can we be better at supporting that as organizations?
I would say absolutely. And I agree in that it's, and I am all for building up, right, and female empowerment without question, because I've had some strong female leaders support me in some of the larger exercises I was talking to. But to your point, you have to recognize the game you're in, right? I'm working at Fox Sports. I am by default hired for my skills, no question. But in order to make a true impact, having to coalesce, right, and get the buy-in of the vast majority of the staff, which happens to be male, right, to do any product rollout, solve any problem that involves anything technical. Virtually the entire technical back end is managed by men, almost all the engineers. But if I need to get client satisfaction for Taco Bell and I need to make something happen, I need to get that buy-in. And so recognizing the environment you're in and building a rapport, however you might have to, right? And so it's about being able to be adaptable. And I think that's what you're talking about. It's not about men versus women. It's about who has what skills, right? And who has what power and decision-making power to get that I need to work with and convince to do some sort of action for net benefit for all, right? Client, revenue, whatever it may be. And right. It's recognition of those skills. And to your point about how others have perhaps influenced my group, influenced my personal career. I have had a number of bosses, right? Men and women. I will tell you, I've had both good and bad men and women, right? Mm-hmm. I have examples of both on every side, irregardless of gender. I will tell you, one of my biggest advocates actually was a male boss at Fox who was outstanding. But it was because, and this is when you ask, like, how could you, things to recognize? It wasn't because he was a man and I was a woman. It was because he recognized a certain set of skills that I was demonstrating, but was not part of my charge, right? It was an area with which I was filling in a gap, and it was a need, 100% need. Wasn't part of my charge, wasn't part of my JD, it was a need that came to light because we were doing and changing structure, right? And so he recognized the skill set I could bring to the table. Let me go forth and fulfill the exercise, right? And fill this institutional need. But then what he did, which was great, was he highlighted the fact that I had gone above and beyond to not my peers, but his leadership, right? In that I recognized there was a gap. I had the skills, he let me fill it, right? And I got to kind of load balance other things on the desk to make sure that we all had net benefit. But he did one step better besides the attaboy, right? And the pat on the back for me directly. The reality is he highlighted it to his superiors. And I feel like that for any person in management, any strong manager is confident enough in themselves to put good people around them, irregardless of gender, right? I hire people who have skills I don't have for a reason, because I don't have them, and I need someone to compliment me. But I guarantee you, if you do a good job for me, I'm going to highlight that you did a good job for me. I didn't do that job. But that's a different management style. And in a lot of cases, and this may, I don't know whose experience, but the poorer managers I've worked for, whatever work was done was their work when they were speaking upwards. And that's one of the key differentials in my mind, male or women. But when you're looking for an advocate, you need someone who is confident enough in themselves to not just empower their team, but highlight the success of their team when appropriate.
No, it's great.
Yep.
And I'll add just a little bit to it in the essence of, I'm just a firm believer in building rapport first, right? Like my skills can talk for themselves and I can show what I can do, but, and maybe my organization is a little different because we do still have some in-person stuff, but I think about like, not just our work and what we do like for our job, but like what happens in the lunchroom, or like what happens when you like are invited to a golf tournament, right? And so like at my organization, we would have a group of males who would just sit in a circle and talk about sports. I don't know a darn thing about it, but one day I just like walked into the middle of the circle and I started a conversation, was like, yeah, like, can you believe that touchdown, or, you know, whatever it was. But then I realized I was doing it myself, right? Like if I had a conversation about like what I was doing on the weekend, I would tend to go to my female colleagues. And so I think it goes both ways in the essence that like we can't put ourselves in this bubble that we only focus on what we want and want our men to join us to that, but we then have to include them. And so even if it's not just from your skill and like the teams and what you're working on from a project standpoint, it also goes beyond that of like, who are you inviting to go happy hour with? Or like, you know, are you doing a team event and nobody likes, and I just say golf because it's golf season right now here. And like, if you just do golf events, but nobody in your team likes to golf, but you and, you know, and the guy from lending, let's find something else that gets everybody excited so we all feel welcome to join. So I think it's just such a big topic where we also can't get stuck in our own little bubbles, but just branch out and be aware of that. So I think that's a really great point to make.
Yeah. Definitely.
Anything to add, Daniela?
You know, I like Nancy, I've had some really good managers and then some really bad ones, male or female. Of course, the bad ones are not my advocates. So it's yes, regardless of gender, you're gonna build your network, and your network will consist of those that you have built a strong relationship with, have respect for, and align with on many values, regardless of gender.
Great, thanks. And I was, Renee, I'll hand it back to you. I was purposely being provocative because just to, I think one of the strongest things we can do as leaders is who we hire. And several of you echoed that in different things. And you know, we have done more at R2I in the last 18 months by just opening the aperture, because we're a permanent work from anywhere company, and now we hire wherever, regardless of any profile. Meaning we don't care what state you're in, we don't care what gender you're in, we don't care, you know, blah blah blah. You can pull, and it's really transformed the company in a positive way. Now the catalyst was COVID, but that, you know, there were a lot of bad things about COVID, as we know, but we try to flip that into a positive. So.
Great, good conversation for sure. I appreciate that. Thank you, Rich. We have.
I'll ask a question if I can, and just, you know, I have a daughter who's 17, and, you know, she'll be going to school soon and then into the workforce. I'm curious, you know, from your perspective, maybe, you know, what would you, looking back, you know, tell your 25-year-old self, you know, thinking about those formative years right now, and think back, what message would you leave your former self?
Oh, my 25-year-old self. Very different than my current self, right? There wasn't the same confidence. There wasn't the same skill. There wasn't the same comfort, right, in your own skin. And I think that comes with time, right? Maturity, experience, the whole thing. I think what I would tell myself, though, from a career perspective, if I focus on that piece, if I had known then how critical, and it all goes back to I think my first answer, the network would be, and really being open to a variety of relationships. By nature, I'm an introvert. right? By day, I have to be extroverted for work, but by night, I need to recharge the battery, right? Like I am not, and so my go-to in college was not to be as open and forthcoming and like gregarious or trying. That came as I got older and figured out the skill set needed to succeed. But I would tell myself to be open to options, people, places, experience, study abroad, right? Like experience things outside your norm and try, right? Just be open, because the more you try on anything, whether to new people, new situation, the more you are giving yourself the knowledge of what you might enjoy, what you might come to appreciate, what you might not like, but you don't assume it. And I think for me that just being open to the world around you when you're 18 to 25, huge, because to your point, it's formative. And when you are open then, right, it allows for so much more adaptability and possibility and adventure, frankly, as you grow later in life.
Mm-hmm. Tina, I have two teenage girls, 19 and 16. And my job as a mom is to raise and build up strong, confident women. And, you know, I know this sounds so cliche, but I'm going to say it anyways. Knowledge is power. It truly is. I manage early in career individuals, and they'll hear me say it. Knowledge is power. If you feel like you don't have the confidence to have a conversation, my advice is in that, you know, early in career stage, seek that knowledge, gain that understanding, get that education, whatever it may be. It'll make you stronger and more confident as an individual. And one last thing that I say all the time to my daughters are, and I actually have it in front of me, I keep it in a Post-it note: be brave, not perfect. Some of us tend to be.
I love
perfect.
that. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's my motto. Be brave, not perfect.
Yep. That's great.
I'm going to use that. That's great. Thank you.
So on the subject of confidence, have any of you experienced imposter syndrome? And if so, how did you kind of work through it and get your confidence?
Who wants to take that one?
That's such a good question. Sorry, Daniela, you go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, who wants to take that first?
That's a nugget and a half.
Go ahead, Bailey. You can take it.
Well, I think it's just normal. Like, and I really want to stress that, like, you are not alone. Everyone on this call right now has felt it, and today may be your day, tomorrow it might be yours. And what I just remember is, like, on those days, it's okay to feel that way. Like, we oftentimes want to push out all these negative thoughts right away that, like, we just don't want to recognize it. It's okay to sit in that for an hour, right? Like, sulk in it, sit in it, and then all of a sudden you got to pop yourself out, right? So, like, my rule of thumb is I get an hour. Every day, like, if I'm having a bad day, I get an hour to be sad and mopey, and I shut my door because I'm crabby. And then after that, it's, hey, all right, let's get a latte. I'm ready to go. And if I have to read, you know, a little book, or, you know, I like to do a chapter a day in a book, and it keeps me moving. But give yourself a time to feel stuck and then find your way out of it. I think that's where we miss the point sometimes, is getting ourselves out of that. Take a walk, find your brain break that you need to get you back on your feet, because nobody else can validate you except for yourself. So I just keep a list of things that always keeps me moving. But yeah, girl, you are not alone.
Yeah, good question, Lisa. Thank you. I know we just have a few minutes left here. Did anyone have anything else they wanted to bring up or talk about? It's been just great. Like, I could do this once a week with you ladies and gentlemen. Okay.
Yeah, and it seems like we answered most of the questions today. I just wanted to jump in and just thank all three of you ladies for joining us today and imparting all of the knowledge that you have with everyone that joined us. I know there were immense benefits to listening to all of your experience and all of your advice that you had to offer today. And thanks to Renee, too, our moderator for today. Really appreciate you taking the time. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And again, thank you again. This was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a
Good day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.